An update is coming to Pokemon Sleep and a few rebalances in the game are going to happen. Welcome back to another Pokemon Sleep video, it's Bravini here. Now this video we're mostly talking about speculations about how things are going to change in Pokemon Sleep, because this maintenance hasn't happened yet at the time of making this video, and we don't know exactly how things are going to change, but I thought I'd make this video anyway just to discuss what we might expect to happen. And perhaps the main rebalance that has caught most people's eyes is a change to Umbreon's main skill. Alright, let's go through all of the planned rebalances in the game. Number 1, Energizing Cheer is getting a second buff. So back in April of this year, Energizing Cheer got a buff so that it has a high chance to trigger the healing on the lowest energy Pokemon on your team. But I guess not enough people were using the skill still, and the developers have decided to buff it once again. It is now going to be even more likely to trigger on the lowest energy Pokemon. Well, how much more likely? That is yet to be seen. Now, just for reference, before this skill got buffed even the first time, we would have expected a 20% chance of the skill triggering on any Pokemon on the team, because there's 5 different Pokemon on a team. But since the first buff, based on the data collected over at Sleep Math Cord, there's a 50-50% chance that this skill will trigger on the lowest energy Pokemon if there's just one lowest energy Pokemon on your team. If there are numerous low energy Pokemon on your team, it will still have a preference of any of the lower energy Pokemon than the higher energy Pokemon. And that was the conclusion from the data collected over at Sleep Math Cord. If you're interested to see their research, I'll leave a link to their Discord in the description below, and you can find it in Publishings, and you can see the conclusions in this screenshot. But unfortunately, all that data will need to be recollected after this update because, well, things are about to change. And we are now expecting a higher probability still to trigger on the lower energy Pokemon on the team. But one thing that still remains a bit of a concern to me is that Energizing Cheer at its max level has 50 heal, which is sometimes too much healing. I personally like to keep my Pokemon above 100% energy most of the day where possible, but if that were the case, anytime I trigger max level healing would bring me over the 150 limit, which is not possible because there's a 150 energy limit. So it would seem like there would be some wastage of energy healing this way, which is why my preference is still using Energy for Everyone Pokemon and rotating my team efficiently to avoid clashing with self-healing Pokemon. The self-healers being the Charge Energy Pokemon, rather than investing in another team healer that is Energizing Cheer. But it would be nice to see this skill buffed even more, because let's say theoretically it's a 100% chance to trigger this healing on a teammate that has the lowest energy, then we are talking about a much more useful skill. Because on some weeks you might be running 2 or 3 self-healing Pokemon that don't need the Energy for Everyone, but you might have 1 or 2 team members who need some healing, and you don't really want to be running Energy for Everyone because you've got self-healers that can heal themselves enough. Pokemon like Dragonite, Tyranitar, Victreebel, they do a fair amount of healing on their own, in which case it makes sense to be running Energizing Cheer, so that you can put that 50 healing on the one teammate that actually needs it. So don't rush into investing in a Slow King or Slow Bro in their main skill levels just yet. We are yet to find out how good this skill will be. But there certainly are some situations where it can be better than Energy for Everyone. The second rebalance in the game is that Houndoom and Houndoom is changing their main skill as well. In fact, their Charge Strength S, which is a fixed charge strength, is becoming Charge Strength M. Now that would be a very welcome change because Charge Strength S gives 3000 strength at level 7 and Charge Strength M gives more than double that at level 7. Which means at first you might expect this to be a very good change because you're doubling Houndoom's skill trigger strength, but unfortunately they will be slightly reducing its skill trigger chance in order to compensate for this. Now, I don't think that's a problem because for a berry Pokemon, I generally prefer that they go to sleep at night so that in the morning, you would get more sneaky snacking rather than sleeping with a skill or a ingredient specialist. Anyway, so if I were to wake up with a skill trigger, and since berry Pokemon can't double bank and have 2 skills in the morning, I would rather that one trigger to be charged Strength M than charge Strength S. The biggest problem though is that I don't know many people who have invested 5 main seeds on their Houndoom, and that's myself included. Which means if you're just using a Houndoom at level 2 main skill since you evolved it from Houndour with 569 strength buffed to 1251, even though relatively speaking it is still a doubling in the trigger strength, it may not be that practical. There may not be that much of a change for anybody to worry about unless you were to drop those main seeds to make it level 7 so that it actually makes a more significant change. So why did they make this change and why just Houndoom? What happened to other Pokemon? Is it because Houndoom is just not being used enough? Or perhaps it could be that they're buffing Umbreon at the same time and they want to give Houndoom still a place in farming productions? Well, let's take a look at Umbreon. Umbreon, probably the most useless Pokemon before this update because, well, it doesn't farm much berries and it doesn't farm much ingredients, and its skill is self-healing. Self-healing should help a Pokemon produce more berries or more ingredients, but Umbreon is good at neither of these things. So what's the point of a skill that keeps Umbreon above 80% energy all day, but it doesn't actually farm much? Well, with this skill change now called, instead of Charge Energy, Moonlight with brackets Charge Energy S, it actually works pretty much exactly the same, but there will be a chance to crit, also called Great Success, in which case a small amount of energy is restored to a random Pokemon on your team. Now there's a few problems with that. Number one, is it going to work like Energizing Cheer where that extra heal that spills over goes to a low energy Pokemon, or is it just going to go to Umbreon again? I mean, it says a random Pokemon on the team and Umbreon is on the team. Is it just going to heal Umbreon some more? We really want these skills to go to low energy Pokemon. And the second problem is, how often is Great Success going to occur? Now, chances are we're going to have to do data collection on this, so if you actually have an invested Umbreon, I don't personally have one, but if you do, maybe you can help us to collect some data to understand how this skill actually works. But besides that, I don't see any rush for anybody to be investing in an Umbreon, even though there is a buff for Umbreon. And one more problem is the Great Success of skill Pokemon. If we were to extrapolate based on what we saw from Mimikyu's skill description, is there a concern that a Great Success cannot occur again until after the next sleep research is done? In other words, capping your Great Success to 1 or 2 per day. Now, while it doesn't say that under Umbreon's new skill, we have yet to verify whether that's true, so I guess time will tell. Finally, the most interesting part of this update, to me anyway, wasn't actually Umbreon. It was actually Halloween Pikachu getting a buff. Halloween Pikachu normally has a slightly better frequency than Pikachu. It isn't anywhere near Raichu's frequency, so for some time, we had suggested using a Witch Hat Pikachu for farming berries if you either don't have a Raichu or if you need another species for your Raikou team. But then Ribbons came along, and with Ribbon's arrival, if you actually have a Pikachu, a 4-star Ribbon Pikachu is actually faster than a Witch Hat Pikachu, but both of which are still slower significantly than Raichu. In fact, just for reference, this is Raichu's base frequency, 36 minutes and 40 seconds. Pikachu without a ribbon is 45 minutes. Witch Hat Pikachu is 43 minutes. Just for reference, if you have a Pikachu with 4-star ribbon, this frequency will go down to about 39 minutes, which is better than the frequency of a Witch Hat Pikachu. They do have slightly different ingredient rates, so let's look at their productions in the Rainianix calculator. As usual, the actual outcome is the interplay between speed and ingredient rate. So let's take a look at the current production differences between the 3 different species and then one of them with the ribbon. Now the ribbon doesn't affect Raichu or Witch Hat Pikachu because they're considered fully evolved. I've got everyone at max energy and level 1. We're only looking at the berry count for the purposes of this video. A base Raichu will farm 135 berries in 24 hours. A base Pikachu will farm 112 berries. A Witch Hat Pikachu farms a tiny bit more berries, but because of its slightly better ingredient rate, it also farms a little bit more ingredients. But then with the ribbon update, if you were to use a regular Pikachu instead of a Witch Hat Pikachu, it would do better than Witch Hat Pikachu with 128 berries and still matching the ingredient count. So if you were building a Raikou team, it's better to use a max ribbon Pikachu. Just be aware that it's 2000 hours slept in order to make this useful. So I guess in order for the developers to sell more Witch Hat Pikachu, they would want you to find that Witch Hat Pikachu to be useful because it was power creeped by just a regular Pikachu. And perhaps that's why it is getting a buff. We don't know by how much yet, but hopefully we see something closer to numbers like this. Thank you for watching, guys. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe, and let me know why you think these skills and Pokemon are getting these changes. Houndoom particularly, I'm not sure why it's getting this change, but it's a welcome change.